wonderful to be here. I want to thank the California College of Art and Queer Cultural Center for sponsoring this event. And it's always just such a pleasure to have conversations with either Tirza or Julia. And tonight I get to have a conversation with both of them. So I'm hoping you'll all join in as well. All art participates in multiple narratives. Tonight I want to briefly present selected work by 4 self-identified queer artists: Linda Bessemer, Jonathan Van Dyke, Josh Flott, and Ulrike Müller, who work abstractly in the spaces between traditional categories, what Rauschenberg famously referred to as the gap. Their work is not critique-based. Rather, taking pleasure in the subversive possibilities of abstraction, they trouble or rupture the pure authoritative, straight and narrow modernist litany in ways that both Julia and Tirza have referred to. I'm going to look at their work primarily through the lens of painting, but it could just as easily be discussed within the framework of, say, sculpture or performance art. It's a subjective lens, and you'll notice that many of the concerns and visual strategies I point out are similar to those in my own work. That is not to say we are a group, nor do we influence each other, although we might. Please note, because of tonight's time constraints, less than 5 minutes per artist, what I'm showing is not necessarily their most recent work, nor does it reflect the full scope of their creative production. Okay, this image. Around 1995, Los Angeles artist Linda Bessemer detached painting's iconic brushstroke, the modernist index of performativity, from its traditional rectangular canvas support and rehung it as an object on the wall, thereby occupying a distinct space between painting, sculpture, and performance. This simple but radical gesture upset painting's figure-ground binary. By painting the acrylic brushstroke on glass instead of canvas or wood panel, Bessemer could easily detach the stroke from its original ground, glass, and reattach it elsewhere, in this case on the wall. The virile brushstroke, or metaphorical penis, formerly fixed to a particular body or ground, could now be attached and reattached to different bodies and grounds, thereby shifting the heterosexual economy of modern American painting to a butch, lesbian, or transgender one. As you can see here in this kind of extended, multiple colored brush strokes, it's very, it kind of extended to these stripe paintings. So if you look back here, you can see how these are the brush strokes, but she begins to see it again pulled off of the glass and folded, and that develops into these the vertical brush strokes develop into the stripe paintings, which she calls folds. So here is a fold from around 2005 or 6. So how does she do it? Layering acrylic paint on large sheets of glass in a subtractive manner similar to reverse glass painting, Bessemer begins by hand painting the top front lines that will be foregrounded on the surface of the painting, then moves back in pictorial space. When the front or top image is complete, she paints a titanium white layer as the top's background. The top's background. Then more consecutive layers of titanium painted on until they create a white surface for the differently patterned painting on the backside, which is then painted additively, like a traditional painting on a white surface, meaning background first, then foreground. So this all is about 10 or 12 layers of paint, totaling about a 1/4 inch in thickness. And you can see that white side there, which is the layers I'm talking about. When the paint is dry, Bessemer pulls the two-sided acrylic sheet off the glass. The painting support or substrate, ground, and pigmented surface are all one, with a different pattern on each side. the pattern not being on the surface, but in the painting. The painting was made entirely out of itself and is not supported or grounded by anything other than itself. At this point, Bessemer can physically manipulate the painting, be it a detached stroke or a detached sheet or skin of solid acrylic paint. In this series of fold paintings, she drapes the somewhat pliable rectangular sheets of acrylic over aluminum rods attached to walls. The back of the painting, meaning that side facing the wall, folds over the rod and becomes part of the front. Sometimes the colorful stripes line up, sometimes they don't. By showing both sides of the physical painting, Bessemer emphasizes the sense of something made out of itself, a subtle metaphor for lesbian or queer subjectivity and identity. So Bessemer is intentionally referencing abstract expressionism, Greenberg's flatness and objecthood, color field painting, minimalism, post-minimalism, decoration, LA finish fetish, and other signifying practices of post-war American abstraction. This is an installation from the Albright Knox, and you can see her painting there in the corner, which measures 120, that's 10 feet by 6 feet. And you can see even in this installation shot with many other so-called minimal work, the fold is there, the shadow of the fold and the flap is there, as well as it's almost curtain-like or beach towel-like the way it folds over. Big Zip Fold, the title of this extended rectangle of many stripes, which drapes down to and out onto the floor, refers, of course, to Barnett Newman's iconic zip that no longer thrusts but slumps and folds under its own weight like body flesh, appropriating the zip for Bessemer's own lesbian queer ends. So I'm just going to show you, I don't want to talk about these a lot. These are paintings that follow after. I haven't seen these personally, and so they intrigued me because I see her, this is still a fold, but the very straight, precise bands, stripes that she paints, she's now beginning to kind of like warp the perspective or warp the space. And that's what, that's what I see her doing here. So the color is not supposed to be in this kind of painting and playing with space. It's, again, if you're an artist who works, say, in a conversation with color field painting, it's supposed to be flat, and she's already warping space. We can talk in terms of warped grids, for instance. Warped grids of crisscrossing lines, bending lines, in a feel of what's supposed to be hard-edge painting. This one's called Big Corner Bulge. This one's on a stretched canvas. She does a lot of experimenting with taking the skins, putting them on, peeling them off, sometimes hanging them by themselves, sometimes putting them back on canvases, putting them back on wood panels, or even stretch canvases. So here, as you have this feeling in Big Corner Bulge, the effect is of a body protruding from under the painting surface, kind of, creating this bulge and again altering the perspective. More recently, she's been working, creating these slabs in which 20 or more consecutive layers of acrylic paint of different colors are built up to a thickness of approximately 5 inches, becoming a kind of paint slab or blob on the glass sheet. Then, utilizing Maya, a 3D imaging program, Bessemer models the surface by running a double sine wave through the form and is able to virtually view what it will look like when it is sculpted. In other words, what colors, forms, and patterns will be revealed. The form that is cut out of the slab of acrylic, the form then is cut out of the slab of acrylic on a CNC 3D router, then hand sculpted and sanded to the final surface, employing technology to build up and carve out what might be called radical bodies of paint. This one is small. I don't know how large they get. Again, I haven't seen this these paintings personally, but it just strikes me that it's so you don't know what you're looking at because there's all this color going on, there's the same skin, but it is now three-dimensionally altered, and then you have all this color. So it really raises issues of perception. What do you see? What do you perceive? Okay. Like Bessemer, Jonathan Van Dyke ruptures the modernist legacy of the color field. Van Dyke makes panels of different materials. He calls them sculpture. I call them painting. Paintings that slowly unfold and make themselves over an extended period of time before the viewer's eyes. They occupy a space between sculpture, painting, and performance, what we might call expanded, time-based, durational, or performative painting. Tubes pierce the panel surface. Paint slowly seeps, oozes, drips out of these openings, soiling the floor, themselves, and anyone or anything beneath. Sometimes paint also drips from behind or bleeds through the canvas, disrupting that pure, flat space of modernist painting. They are always unfixed, incomplete, in the process of self-becoming. It is messy and pleasurable. The drips suggest Pollock's drip paintings, while pools of colorful paint accumulating on the floor remind one of Linda Benglis's poor latex floor paintings of the early 70s. Well aware of his queer body as a rupture to culture, Van Dyke drips rainbows of color as metaphor for transformative disruptions in social structures. He is interested in the concept of transmission of body fluids and discharge, disease, queerness, and male artistic lineage that he himself places himself in. Van Dyke deliberately references work by successful male painters such as Pollock, Stella, Nolan, and Picasso, passing on lineage from them to him, or maybe it's his desire for that transmission. At the same time, he acknowledges feminist influences. The paintings are often site-specific. Here's one. This is wood that is woven. And he talks here a lot about this. It's the first one was, I should have said, was black woven, made out of black woven nylon webbing. And this one is a wood weave, and they're both based on shaker chair patterns with the paint dripping out of the holes onto the painting body and onto the floor. He explains that both of the wall pieces are shaped after Stella's black paintings, but purposefully made asymmetrical, pushing together the language of high art, minimalist painting, the minimalist design of religious shaker and Amish communities. In other words, a queerification of both Stella and shakers. So, a sculptural box, in this case, these paintings are often site-specific, and sometimes they're augmented by performance as part of their gallery or museum presentation. More often than not, though, the performance remains private in Van Dyke's studio as part of his painting process. In this piece, Obstructed View, it's a museum installation. It consists of the two sculptures of paintings, 2 men and 1 locker room bench. The sculptural box overhead drips on the locker room bench floor and the 2 male performers. The locker room reference, the bench, was to create, he explains, was to create a space of bodily intimacy and desire, one where the body was in transition, preparing for or washing off from an event. Here's some other smaller ones where the paintings, the paintings perform. It's performative making. In later works, Van Dyke shifts from paintings that perform to utilizing performance to make the paintings. Paintings made with the dancers in his studio continue to explore space between painting, sculpture, and performance, as well as authorship. For 3 years, Van Dyck has worked closely with 2 male dancers who are also a couple in real life, choreographing simple movements that generate different types of marks on the canvas on the floor, functioning as a painting arena. He tells the dancers to focus on one another to follow his choreographic directions, not to focus on the marks nor the painting. In submission and domination choreography, for example, one dancer trusts the other to move him around the canvas, while Van Dyck inserts packets of paint into their costumes that will break open and leave stains and mark on the canvas. Palimpsests of movement and relational dynamics, with the painting becoming both a document of the process and a work of art. That's not this particular one. Van Dyck writes, "I'm committed to working over and over with the same dancers, and they are in a relationship. We've managed a sort of triad. There's no hiding from